When my daughter-in-law stood up at the head of my dining table, the table I'd owned for 37 years, and announced to 23 guests that I was nothing more than a charity case living off their generosity, I didn't say a word. I just sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, watching her perform for an audience that included my son, my grandchildren, and people I'd known since they were in diapers. She smiled, that tight, practiced smile of hers, the one that never reached her eyes, and waited for me to crumble. But I didn't. I just set down my fork, folded my napkin, and let her finish. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay silent. At least until the moment comes when your silence ends and the truth walks through the door. My name is Brielle, and this is a story about betrayal, humiliation, and the sweet, quiet justice that comes when someone mistakes your kindness for weakness. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the Thanksgiving dinner from hell didn't begin that November Thursday. It began 2 years earlier. On the day my son Marcus brought home a woman who looked at my house like she was calculating its resale value. For most of my adult life, I've been what people call comfortable, not wealthy in the flashy way, but secure. My late husband, Thomas, worked in commercial real estate development, and I spent 30 years as a registered nurse in pediatric oncology. We saved carefully, invested wisely, and by the time Thomas passed away 7 years ago, he'd left me with a pay-off home in a beautiful neighborhood, a healthy retirement portfolio, and enough life insurance that I'd never have to worry about money again. Thomas always said, "Brie, I want you to live well, not just survive." And I did. My son Marcus was our only child, and I poured everything into raising him right. Piano lessons, summer camps, private tutoring when he struggled with math, college tuition paid in full so he'd graduate debt-free. When he wanted to start his own digital marketing business after college, I signed his first business loan, $50, and never mentioned it again. When the business nearly failed in year 2, I quietly transferred $25 into his account with a note that said, "Believe in yourself. Love Mom." That's what mothers do. We catch our children when they fall, and we never ask for the net back. Marcus and I were close. Sunday dinners at my place were tradition. He'd bring wine. I'd make his favorite pot roast with those buttery herb potatoes he'd loved since he was 7, and we'd sit in my sunroom talking about everything and nothing. He'd tell me about difficult clients. I'd share stories from my nursing days, and we'd laugh until our sides hurt. Those were good years, simple years. I thought I knew my son inside and out. Then he met Vanessa. It was April 17th, a Saturday, when Marcus called and asked if he could bring someone to dinner. "Her name's Vanessa, Mom. She's special. I really want you two to meet." I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Genuine excitement, hope, maybe even love. Of course, I said yes. I spent the entire Saturday morning cleaning my already clean house, making sure the guest bathroom had the nice hand towels, and preparing a meal that would impress. Vanessa arrived wearing designer heels that clicked against my hardwood floors like little hammers. She was beautiful in that sharp, angular way, high cheekbones, perfect makeup, hair styled like she'd just left a salon. She held a bottle of wine that probably cost $40 and looked at my home the way an appraiser looks at property. I saw her eyes catalog everything: the original crown molding, the updated kitchen with marble counters, the view of the garden through the French doors, the artwork on the walls. "Mrs. Holland, what a lovely home," she said, extending a hand with perfectly manicured nails, painted a deep burgundy. "Marcus has told me so much about you. Please call me Brielle," I said, taking her hand. It was cool, her grip firm and brief. "I'm so happy to finally meet you. Marcus speaks very highly of you." We made it through dinner with pleasant conversation. Vanessa worked in pharmaceutical sales, made excellent commission, drove a leased BMW, and had very strong opinions about real estate markets and investment opportunities. She asked pointed questions about my house when had I bought it. What did I think it was worth now? Had I considered downsizing now that I was alone and getting older? She made that last part sound like a compassionate observation, but something in her tone felt calculating. Looking back, I should have noticed how Marcus watched her during dinner, like he was waiting for her approval of me, of my home, of the life I'd built. I should have noticed how she steered the conversation toward money, assets, and financial planning. I should have noticed the way she touched Marcus's arm and said, "Your mother has done so well for herself, hasn't she, baby?" Like my security was something that benefited him by extension. But I wanted Marcus to be happy, and if he loved this woman, I was determined to love her too. 6 months later, Marcus called with news. He and Vanessa were engaged. They'd gotten engaged at some resort in Napa Valley, and Vanessa had posted 43 photos on social media before Marcus even called me. I found out I was going to have a daughter-in-law from a Facebook notification. When I gently mentioned this to Marcus, he apologized. "Vanessa's just excited, Mom. You know how women are about weddings." I let it slide. The wedding planning became a second full-time job for Vanessa, and somehow I became both the audience and the ATM. She'd call me 3 times a week with updates, always ending with subtle hints about costs. "The venue we love is just slightly out of budget," she'd say with a sigh. "But Marcus says we shouldn't ask you for help because you've already done so much for him." That's a manipulation tactic, by the way. I recognized it from 40 years of dealing with people. Say you don't want to ask for something while making it clear that asking is exactly what you're doing. So I offered to contribute $15,000 toward the wedding. Vanessa hugged me and cried perfect tears that didn't smudge her mascara. "You're the mother I never had," she whispered. "The wedding cost $62,000. I ended up paying $30,000 of it." 3 months after the wedding, Marcus and Vanessa's apartment lease was ending. Their landlord was raising the rent by $400 a month, and Vanessa declared it highway robbery. Over dinner at my house, these dinners had become monthly obligations rather than joyful traditions. Vanessa mentioned how stressful apartment hunting was. "Everything decent is so expensive," she said, looking around my dining room. "It must be nice to have so much space, Brielle. Don't you ever get lonely in this big house all by yourself?" Marcus jumped in. "Mom, Vanessa and I were actually talking about something. What if we moved in here with you, just temporarily, while we save up for a down payment on our own place? We'd pay rent, of course. It would help you with expenses, and it would help us save faster." I felt something twist in my chest, but I looked at my son's hopeful face and heard myself say, "Of course. This is your home too, Marcus. It's always been your home." Vanessa smiled. "We'd pay you $800 a month. That's fair, right? My monthly expenses for that house mortgage paid off were maybe $100-200 for utilities, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. With 2 more people, those costs would increase. $800 wouldn't even cover the difference." But I nodded. "That sounds fine." They moved in that June. Vanessa immediately began rearranging furniture, replacing my kitchen towels with her own, and commenting on how dated. Some of my decor choices were, "Don't worry," she'd say, patting my hand, "I'll help you modernize, make this place feel fresh again." Marcus seemed oblivious. He was working long hours trying to grow his business, often leaving early and coming home after 9 p.m. Vanessa worked from home 2 days a week, which meant I'd come home from my part-time volunteer work at the hospital to find her in my kitchen, on her laptop, eating my groceries and redecorating my life. The first time Vanessa openly disrespected me was 4 months after they'd moved in. It was October 3rd. I remember because it was Thomas's birthday, and I'd spent the morning at his grave with flowers. I came home to find Vanessa had removed the large family photo from the living room wall, the one of Thomas, Marcus, and me from Marcus's college graduation, and replaced it with some abstract canvas print she'd ordered online. "Where's my family photo?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Oh, that old thing. It was making the room feel so dark and depressing," Vanessa said, not looking up from her phone. "I put it in your bedroom. The living room is where we entertain guests, Brielle. We need it to look current." "This is my home, Vanessa. That photo has hung in that spot for 8 years. She finally looked up, and her expression was patient in the way you'd look at a confused elderly person. "Brielle, we live here too now. It's our home as much as yours. Marcus and I agreed the space needed updating. Maybe you're just not used to sharing your space after being alone for so long." I felt my hands go cold. The way she said "our home as much as yours" made something very clear. She didn't see herself as a guest. She saw herself as an equal owner. But I swallowed my anger, retrieved my family photo from where she'd stashed it in my bedroom closet, and hung it back up in the living room. That night, Marcus came home to Vanessa crying at the kitchen table. "Your mother yelled at me today," she said through dramatic sobs. "I was just trying to help make the house look nice, and she accused me of overstepping." I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen, watching my son comfort his wife for a transgression I hadn't committed. "I didn't yell, Marcus. I simply put back a photo that meant something to me. Mom, Vanessa's just trying to contribute," Marcus said, and there was an edge in his voice I'd never heard directed at me before. "Maybe you could be a little more flexible. She's family now." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, in the home my husband and I had built, in the room where we'd dreamed about growing old together, and wondered how I'd become the problem in my own house. The $800 rent checks that Vanessa had promised. They lasted 3 months. In month 4, Marcus approached me sheepishly. "Mom, business has been tight. Would it be okay if we skipped rent this month? We'll make it up next month, I promise." I said yes because he was my son, and you don't charge your son rent when he's struggling. Month 5, no check. Month 6, no check. By month 8, they'd paid $400 out of a promised $400, and Vanessa had the audacity to ask if I'd help them buy a new bedroom set because the furniture in the guest room is really hurting my back. But it wasn't just the money. It was the gradual takeover of my life. Vanessa started inviting her friends over without asking me. My home became the setting for her book club, her wine tasting parties, her sister's baby shower. She'd informed me the day before. "Just so you know, I'm having 12 people over tomorrow afternoon. You'll probably want to stay in your room or go out so we have space. Stay in my room." In my own house, she criticized the food I cooked. "Brielle, that pot roast is so heavy. Don't you know how unhealthy all that butter is? No wonder Marcus has gained weight since we got married." She'd order salads and grain bowls from expensive delivery services, using my credit card that I'd added her to for household emergencies, and never offer to reimburse me. My belongings started disappearing. The hand-painted fruit bowl my mother had given me suddenly, accidentally broken and thrown away. The vintage tablecloth from my wedding, ruined with wine stains and disposed of without asking if I wanted to try to save it. My favorite coffee mugs replaced with a matching set Vanessa preferred because they were more Instagram-worthy. I tried talking to Marcus. Every Sunday morning, I'd try to get him alone, but Vanessa was always there, always listening, always ready to reframe my concerns as me being resistant to change or having trouble adjusting to not being alone anymore. "Mom, I think you might be depressed," Marcus said to me one evening in November, with Vanessa nodding sympathetically beside him. "It's been 7 years since Dad died. Maybe you should talk to someone," Vanessa's therapist is amazing. We could get you an appointment. I'm not depressed, Marcus. I'm frustrated that my home is being taken over and I'm not being heard. Taken over. Vanessa's eyes went wide with manufactured hurt. Brielle, I have done nothing but try to help you maintain this house. I clean, I organize, I modernize things that were falling apart, and this is the thanks I get being accused of, what? Stealing your house. But that's when I noticed something that changed everything. We were sitting in the living room, and on the coffee table was a folder. While Vanessa was performing her wounded speech, the folder shifted, and I caught sight of the tab label, Holland Property Renovation Proposal. That night, after Marcus and Vanessa went to bed, I crept downstairs and found that folder. Inside were architectural drawings, contractor estimates, and Pinterest boards printed out on my color printer using my ink and paper. Vanessa had been designing a complete renovation of my home, knocking down walls, updating bathrooms, installing a modern kitchen, adding a primary suite extension. The estimated cost was $175,000. There was a handwritten note clipped to the top in Vanessa's sharp, angular handwriting. Phase 1, get her comfortable with small changes. Phase 2, convince her the house needs necessary update. For safety/value. Phase 3, offer to manage contractor relationships. Phase 4, get name on deed as co-owner to protect investment. I read that note 17 times. My hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. This wasn't about helping me or contributing to the household. This was a calculated plan to take ownership of my home. I kept reading. There were printed emails between Vanessa and a real estate attorney, inquiring about adding adult children to property deeds and tenancy in common agreements. There was a draft letter to me, never sent, that began, Dear Brielle, Marcus and I have been thinking about our future and the future of the family home. We'd like to propose a partnership. There was a spreadsheet tracking every dollar they'd spent on anything related to the house, including groceries they'd bought, toilet paper, light bulbs, itemized with dates and amounts. At the bottom was a total, $8,347.63. Below that, a note, amount invested in property improvements and household maintenance, to be used as evidence of contribution when requesting deed transfer. I sat on my kitchen floor until 4:00 a.m., my back against the cabinets my husband and I had chosen together 20 years ago, and felt a rage I hadn't known I was capable of. But underneath the rage was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't cultural differences or generational disconnect. This was a plan, a con, and my son was either part of it or so blinded by his wife that he couldn't see what she was doing to his mother. How could I have been so blind? Every boundary crossed, every disrespect, every presumption. It all made sense now. She wasn't being thoughtless or insensitive. She was being strategic. I thought about confronting them immediately. I imagined walking upstairs, throwing open their bedroom door, and demanding answers. But something Thomas used to say stopped me. Brielle, when someone shows you who they are, don't just believe them, outmaneuver them. So I didn't confront them. I started gathering evidence. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I never thought I'd be, a detective in my own home. I started checking my credit cards more carefully and discovered that Vanessa had charged $6,200 in the past 6 months. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, spa treatments, gifts for her friends. All on my account. When I'd added her as an authorized user, I'd explicitly said it was for household emergencies only. This was theft, plain and simple. I logged into my bank accounts and noticed something else. Marcus's business account, which I'd been added to as co-signer from the original loan, showed transfers I didn't recognize. Large payments to something called VKH Consulting LC. I did some digging online and discovered that VKH Consulting was registered in Vanessa's name, Vanessa Catherine Hammond. She'd kept her maiden name for her side business, one that Marcus apparently knew nothing about based on their joint tax returns, which I'd helped them with the previous year. She was funneling money for Marcus's business, money that included my original $50,000 investment and the $25,000 bailout, into a private account that only she controlled. Over 18 months, she'd moved $31,000. I felt sick, but I kept digging. I started checking the mailbox before anyone else woke up. That's how I found the pre-approval letter from a mortgage company addressed to Marcus and Vanessa for a home equity line of credit on my house. They'd applied to borrow against my property without my knowledge. The application had been denied because they weren't on the deed, but the fact that they'd tried made my blood run cold. I found text messages on an iPad Vanessa left unlocked on the kitchen counter. Messages to her sister. The old lady is finally starting to crack. M says she's been acting weird and might need to go into assisted living soon. Once she's out of the picture, the house is basically ours. M is the only heir, and I'm his wife. We just have to be patient. Messages to her mother. Living here rent. Free has let us save almost $40K this year. Once we get her to add him to the deed for estate planning purposes, we can take out a HELOC and use it for down payment on our actual dream house. She'll never have to know. Messages to her friend Kendra. I swear to God, if she tells me one more story about her dead husband, I'm going to lose it. Yes, Carol, we know you had a great marriage. Now you're alone and we're here, so maybe focus on the present. I took photos of everything. Every text message, every document, every credit card statement. I backed them up to a cloud account that only I had access to, and I started planning. The first call I made was to my attorney, Richard Chen, who'd handled Thomas's estate and my will. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he let out a low whistle. Brielle, this is elder financial abuse. We can pursue criminal charges if you want to go that route. I don't want my son arrested, Richard, but I want them out of my house, and I want to make sure they can never do this to me or anyone else again. Understood. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next 2 weeks, Richard helped me build my case. We documented every unpaid rent payment. We compiled the credit card fraud. We gathered the evidence of Vanessa's secret transfers from Marcus's business. We prepared a formal eviction notice that would hold up in court. Richard also helped me immediately remove Vanessa as an authorized user on all my accounts and place fraud alerts on my credit reports. The second call I made was to Alan Prescott, my financial advisor. Alan, I need you to help me understand exactly what I own, what it's worth, and how to protect it. Alan ran a complete audit of my finances and helped me create a detailed asset protection plan. We opened a new checking account at a different bank and transferred most of my funds there. We made sure my will was updated and crystal clear, everything to Marcus, but held in trust until age 45, with specific provisions preventing his spouse from accessing it if they divorced. We secured my deed in a safe deposit box at the bank, Brielle. Alan said during our final meeting, "You're in excellent financial shape. You have nothing to fear from these people. They have no legal claim to anything you own." But I still needed the perfect moment to reveal the truth. I needed witnesses. I needed a setting where Vanessa would feel comfortable enough to show her true colors in front of people who mattered. I needed her to humiliate me publicly so that her downfall would be equally public. And then Marcus mentioned that Vanessa wanted to host Thanksgiving at our house. She wants to invite both sides of the family, Marcus said excitedly. Her parents, her sister, our cousins, your friends from the hospital. She wants to make it a real family affair. She's already planning the menu. I smiled. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. Tell Vanessa I'm happy to help with whatever she needs. Little did they know, I was 3 steps ahead. While Vanessa was planning a Thanksgiving dinner designed to showcase her as the lady of the house, I was planning something else entirely. I'd invited some guests of my own people she didn't know about. people who would be very interested in what unfolded. For the 3 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, Vanessa went into full production mode. She ordered a $400 dining table centerpiece from some boutique florist. She hired a professional cleaning service to deep clean her house using my credit card, naturally, though I didn't stop her. She wanted documentation of expenses, and I was happy to provide it. She bought a designer dress for the occasion and posted Thanksgiving photos on Instagram with captions like hosting at the Holland estate and grateful to open our home to family this year. Our home, she'd started calling it our home on social media, tagging the location as if she owned it. Marcus was oblivious, buried in work, trusting his wife to handle the holiday. I watched him those weeks, my boy, and wondered if he knew what she was doing. I wanted to believe he was simply naive, that she'd manipulated him the same way she'd tried to manipulate me. But sometimes at dinner, I'd catch him looking at me with something like pity, and I wondered if he'd bought into Vanessa's narrative that I was a lonely, declining old woman who needed them to manage my life. Vanessa assigned me tasks for Thanksgiving like I was her assistant. Brielle, you'll handle the sweet potatoes. Nothing too complicated. May be just a simple mash. I'm doing everything else at a more elevated level, and we don't want anything to look out of place. I nodded and smiled, of course, dear. Whatever you think is best. She didn't notice that I was documenting everything. Every dismissive comment, every order disguised as a request, every time she referred to my furniture as ours, or my home as the house Marcus and I are managing for the family. I also made my own phone calls. I invited my friend Margaret from the hospital, whose husband was a retired judge. I invited my neighbor Tom, who happened to be a CPA. I invited Marcus's godfather, Uncle Raymond, who'd known Marcus since he was in diapers and had never quite warmed to Vanessa. And I made one more call, to a lawyer friend of Richard Chen's who specialized in family law and had agreed to attend as my guest. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and cold. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., made my coffee, and sat in my sunroom watching the sunrise through the windows Thomas and I had installed during our kitchen renovation 15 years ago. I thought about him that morning, wondered what he'd say about all this. Thomas never tolerated disrespect, but he also never made a scene. He'd taught me that the most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming. I hope I'm making you proud, honey, I whispered to the sunrise. By 10:00 a.m., Vanessa was in full drill sergeant mode, barking orders at Marcus, rearranging my dishes, criticizing the way I'd folded the napkins, and checking that the rented wine glasses were properly polished. She'd hired a bartender to serve drinks and a catering assistant to help plate food, which seemed excessive for a family dinner, but I understood. This wasn't about gratitude or togetherness. This was about performance. Brielle, you might want to change, Vanessa said, looking at my emerald green dress, a beautiful cashmere piece that Thomas had bought me for our 35th anniversary. You look a little dated, maybe something simpler. I don't want you to feel out of place. I smiled serenely. I'll keep this on, thank you. Thomas loved this dress. She rolled her eyes in a way she thought I didn't see. Guests started arriving at 2:00 p.m. Vanessa positioned herself at the door like the hostess, greeting everyone with air kisses and declarations of welcome to our home. She gave tours, pointing out improvements we've made and our design choices, taking credit for things that had existed in my house for decades. My invited guests arrived quietly and were greeted by Marcus, who seemed genuinely happy to see Uncle Raymond and the others. Vanessa looked momentarily confused by their presence but recovered quickly, probably assuming I'd invited some old people friends who'd admire her and tell her what a good daughter-in-law she was. By 3:00 p.m., 23 people were gathered in my dining room and living room, drinks flowing, conversation humming. Vanessa flitted around like a butterfly, making sure everyone saw her, heard her, acknowledged her as the woman who'd brought us all together. The dining room table, my table, the one Thomas and I had bought at an estate sale 37 years ago and refinished by hand, was set beautifully. I had to admit, Vanessa had an eye for presentation. Crystal glasses sparkled, candles flickered, that expensive centerpiece cascaded with autumn leaves and white roses. Place cards in calligraphy directed everyone to their assigned seats. I noticed my place card was at the far end of the table, squeezed between the wall and Uncle Raymond. Vanessa had seated herself at the head where I always sat, with Marcus to her right at the other head. At 4:00 p.m., Vanessa clinked her glass and called everyone to attention. If everyone could please find their seats, we'll begin serving our Thanksgiving feast. People settled in. I made my way to my assigned corner, catching Margaret's eye across the table. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. Everything was in place. Once everyone was seated, Vanessa remained standing at the head of the table. She raised her wine glass, and the room fell silent. I want to thank everyone for joining Marcus and me today in our home. She began, emphasis on our home. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, and I have so much to be grateful for this year. A wonderful husband, a beautiful home, and the opportunity to bring everyone together in this space that Marcus and I have worked so hard to create. I saw Uncle Raymond's eyebrows rise slightly. Marcus looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I especially want to acknowledge someone very special. Vanessa continued, and I felt the room's attention shift toward me. Brielle has been living with us this year, and we're so grateful we can provide her with a place to call home in her later years, living with them. In my own house, it's not always easy blending a household, Vanessa said with a practiced sympathetic smile. There are adjustments, compromises, different ways of doing things, but Marcus and I believe in taking care of family even when it's challenging. Margaret's hand moved to her mouth. Tom was staring at Vanessa in disbelief. The truth is, Vanessa said, and her voice dropped to a stage whisper that everyone could hear perfectly, maintaining a home of this size takes significant resources. Marcus and I have been covering most of the expenses, the upkeep, the improvements. We've essentially been supporting this household financially while also supporting Brielle emotionally and practically. That's when she said it. The line I'd been waiting for. Brielle is essentially a charity case living off our generosity. But that's okay, that's what family does. We take care of those who can no longer fully care for themselves. The room went completely silent. I could hear the candles flickering. Someone's phone buzzed. Marcus was staring at his plate, his face red. I set down my fork slowly, folded my napkin, and let the silence stretch. Vanessa looked at me, waiting for tears, for protest, for collapse. I gave her none of those things. I simply stood up. That's an interesting story, Vanessa, I said calmly. Would you mind if I tell everyone a different version, one that includes some facts you might have forgotten? Vanessa's smile faltered. Brielle, this isn't really the time. No, I think it's exactly the time, I said. I walked slowly to where she stood at the head of my table and gestured to the chair. Please sit down. You must be tired from all that hosting. Something in my voice made her sit. Marcus looked between us, confused and increasingly alarmed. I remained standing, and I looked around the room at 20. 3 faces, family, friends, strangers who'd become witnesses. This house, I began, was purchased by my late husband Thomas and me in 1989 for $127,000. We refinished it together, room by room. Every piece of crown molding, every window, every floorboard, we chose it. Installed it, paid for it. Thomas died 7 years ago, and he left this house to me, paid in full in my name alone. The current value, according to my most recent assessment, is $2 million. I saw Vanessa's face go pale. Marcus and Vanessa moved in with me, not the other way around, in June of last year. They asked to stay temporarily while saving for their own home. We agreed on $800 monthly rent, which would have totaled $12,800 by now. They've paid $2,400. That's $10,400 in unpaid rent. Marcus's head snapped up. Mom, I didn't. We were going to. I held up a gentle hand. Let me finish, sweetheart. I pulled out my phone and opened my Notes app, which was backed up to the cloud and also printed in documents in my purse. In the past 18 months, Vanessa has charged $6,200 to my credit card, a card she was authorized to use for household emergencies only. Designer clothes, spa treatments, dinners at restaurants I've never been to. I have documentation of every charge. The lawyer friend, Janet Sterling, was nodding subtly and taking notes on her phone. Vanessa also established a business called VKH Consulting and transferred $31,000 from Marcus's business account into her private account. Marcus, did you know about those transfers? My son looked like he'd been punched. What transfers? Additionally, I continued. Marcus and Vanessa applied for a home equity line of credit on this property, my property, without my knowledge or consent. That's attempted fraud. The retired judge, Margaret's husband Harold, made a low noise in his throat. But the most interesting thing I found, I said, and now I was looking directly at Vanessa, was your planning documents, the ones where you outlined your 4-phase plan to get your name on my deed. The ones where you texted your friends about waiting for the old lady to be out of the picture so you could take over my home. Vanessa shot to her feet. That's a lie. You went through my private documents you left in a folder in my living room. I said calmly, in my house, nothing about this situation is private, Vanessa, because none of it is yours. The room erupted. Uncle Raymond was standing, shouting something at Marcus. Vanessa's mother was crying. Vanessa's father was demanding to know what was going on. Margaret was staring at Vanessa like she was something toxic, but I wasn't finished, so let's clarify something for everyone here. I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through the chaos. I am not a charity case. I am not living off anyone's generosity. I own this home outright. I have a retirement portfolio valued at over $800,000. I have 2 pensions and Social Security. I volunteer at the hospital because I want to, not because I have to. Every meal you've eaten at this table, Vanessa, came from groceries I paid for. Every light you've turned on runs on electricity I pay for. Every shower you've taken used water from my utility bill. I turned to Marcus and my voice softened. Baby, I love you. You're my son, and nothing changes that. But this, I gestured around the room, this ends today. From my purse, I pulled out 2 envelopes. One was addressed to Marcus and Vanessa. The other was addressed to Richard Chen. This is a formal eviction notice, I said, handing the first envelope to Marcus. You have 30 days to vacate my property. You owe me $10,400 in back rent, which I will forgive if you leave peacefully. The $6,200 in credit card fraud and the $31,000 in diverted business funds are different matters. I turned to Vanessa, who was shaking with rage and panic. You have 2 choices, Vanessa. Choice 1, you repay Marcus the $31,000 you stole from his business within 60 days, and I don't pursue criminal charges for the credit card fraud. Choice 2, I turn all of this evidence over to the police and the district attorney, and we let the legal system handle it. Vanessa exploded. You vindictive old bitch. I've done nothing but help you. I've cleaned, I've organized, I've made this place livable. You're just jealous that Marcus chose me, that he has a life that doesn't revolve around you. I think we're finished here, I said quietly. Everyone, please help yourselves to dinner. I'm afraid Vanessa won't be joining us. This is bullshit, Vanessa shrieked. She turned to Marcus. Tell her she can't do this. You're her son, this house will be yours anyway. Tell her to stop this insanity. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read: shock, shame, maybe the first glimmers of understanding. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "Mom, I didn't know about the transfers. I swear to God I didn't know." "I know, baby," I said gently. "We'll talk, but not right now." Vanessa grabbed her purse and her coat. "Fuck this. Fuck all of you. Marcus, we're leaving." But Marcus stayed seated. "No," he said quietly. "No, Vanessa, I think you should go." The words hung in the air. Vanessa stared at her husband, waiting for him to stand up, to choose her, to fight for her. He didn't move. "Fine," she hissed. "Fine, you'll regret this, all of you." She looked around the room wildly. "You're a bunch of small-minded, pathetic people who can't stand to see a strong woman get ahead. Well, guess what? I don't need any of you. I don't need this house. I don't need Vanessa." Janet Sterling said calmly, standing up and pulling out a business card. "I'm an attorney specializing in family law and fraud cases. If you continue making threats or defamatory statements, I'll add harassment to the list of actions we're considering. I suggest you take Mrs. Holland's generous offer, leave peacefully, and contact your own legal representation." Vanessa's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: rage, fear, calculation, defeat. Finally, she turned on her expensive heel and stormed out. The front door slammed so hard I heard the windows rattle. The silence she left behind was thick and complicated. Uncle Raymond stood up. "Brielle, I am so sorry. If I'd known." "You couldn't have known, Ray," I said. "I didn't want anyone to know until I had to." Tom, my CPA neighbor, cleared his throat. "Brielle, if you need help sorting out the financial documentation or dealing with any tax implications of the business transfers, I'm happy to assist." "Thank you, Tom. I might take you up on that." Margaret came around the table and hugged me fiercely. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she whispered. But I wasn't looking at any of them. I was looking at Marcus, who had his head in his hands. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus stood up. "Mom, can we talk privately?" I nodded. We went to the sunroom, closing the door behind us. Through the windows, I could see guests starting to serve themselves dinner. Conversations resuming in hushed, shocked tones. Marcus turned to me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I mean, I knew she could be difficult sometimes, but I didn't think. I never thought she was planning to steal my house." I finished gently. "I feel like the biggest idiot in the world," he said, his voice breaking. "How did I not see it? How did I let her treat you that way? Because she was smart," I said. "And because you loved her, or thought you did. And because she made you feel like protecting her meant choosing between her and me." "But you're my mother," he said, and he was crying now, real tears, the kind he hadn't cried since he was a little boy. "You're my mother, and you've done nothing but support me my whole life, and I let her. I let her call you a charity case in front of everyone. I just sat there." I took his hands. They were shaking. "Marcus, listen to me. You're going to have to figure some things out. About your marriage, about your judgment, about what kind of man you want to be. Those are your choices to make. But I need you to know something. I love you. That doesn't change. What changes is that I will never again allow someone to disrespect me in my own home. And I will never again confuse enabling with love." "What do I do now?" he asked helplessly. "That's up to you, baby, but you have 30 days to figure it out." He nodded, wiping his eyes. Can I stay for dinner? This is still your home for the next 30 days." I said, "Of course you can stay." We went back to the dining room. Marcus sat down at his place, and I took my usual seat, at the head of the table, where I belonged. Uncle Raymond said a blessing, and we ate. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I'd imagined, but it was honest. People asked me gentle questions, offered support, shared their own stories of family complications. The food was excellent, even if the circumstances were extraordinary. Marcus barely ate. He kept glancing at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Around 8:00 p.m., guests started leaving. Everyone hugged me. Several people slipped me their phone numbers and offered help if I needed it. Janet Sterling gave me her card and said, "If she gives you any trouble at all, you call me immediately." By 9:00 p.m., the house was clean. Margaret and Tom had insisted on helping, and quiet. Marcus had gone upstairs to the guest room without a word. I sat in my sunroom with a cup of tea and looked out at my garden, bare for the winter but still beautiful in the moonlight. My house was mine, my life was mine, and I was free. Marcus and Vanessa separated within 2 weeks. She moved out on day 12, leaving a trail of drama, angry texts, and half-hearted threats about lawsuits that never materialized. She repaid $18,000 of the $31,000 she'd stolen. Her father made her do it, I later learned, and the rest we let go. It wasn't worth the fight, and Marcus's business couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle. Marcus stayed in my home for the full 30 days, and we spent that time really talking for the first time in 2 years. He admitted that he'd known, on some level, that Vanessa was controlling, that she'd been changing him, isolating him from me and his friends. But I thought if I just went along with it, if I made her happy enough, she'd eventually relax, he said. I didn't realize she'd never be satisfied. There was always going to be one more thing she needed, one more way I had to prove I chose her. They divorced 8 months later. It was ugly and expensive, but Marcus came through it changed, humbled, wiser, and finally ready to look at his own patterns. He moved into his own apartment, threw himself into rebuilding his business legitimacy, and started going to therapy. We have Sunday dinners again now, just the 2 of us. He helps me with projects around the house. Real help, not performative hosting. We talk about his therapy, his dates, his hopes for the future. We talk about his father. We talk about what family really means. Just last month, he said to me, "Mom, I need to tell you something. What Vanessa did was wrong, and how I let her treat you was unforgivable. But there's a part of me that's grateful it happened, because I think I needed to lose myself completely to figure out who I actually am." Does that make sense? It did. Because sometimes the worst betrayals are the ones that crack us open and let the light in. As for Vanessa, I heard through the social media grapevine. I don't follow her, but people tell me things. That she's engaged again to someone who owns a tech startup. She posted photos of a new house, a new ring, a new life. Good for her, I suppose. I hope she's learned something, but I suspect she hasn't. Some people never do. What I learned is this: silence doesn't mean weakness. There's incredible power in watching, waiting, and documenting. There's strength in knowing your worth even when people try to convince you you're worthless. And there's freedom in finally saying no. I also learned that you can love someone deeply and still set boundaries that protect yourself. Loving my son doesn't mean tolerating disrespect from his partner. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and having grace doesn't mean accepting abuse. If you're going through something similar, if someone in your life is slowly taking over, eroding your boundaries, making you doubt your reality, please know this: trust yourself. Document everything. Seek advice from professionals who can help you see clearly. And remember that you deserve to be treated with dignity in your own home, in your own life, no matter how much you love the people hurting you. Family is important, but so are you. My name is Brielle, and this is the story of how I stayed silent while someone tried to steal my life, and how I found my voice again when it mattered most. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. Remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might be just beginning. Don't be afraid to write your own ending, one where you stand up, speak out, and reclaim what's rightfully yours.